Hi, thanks for tuning in to our Practical Nerds weekly podcast. I'm Shubh, and together with my partner and co host Patrick, we normally invest in founders in design, construction, renovation, and logistics technology. Many of our friends in the ecosystem wanted us to start a podcast on the built world, and in return, we decided to honor their request with a show about nothing at all. Hey Patrick, something seems a bit different this time around, right? Who do we have here with us?
That's right. I mean, we thought ourselves, how can we beat nothing? And we invited Adam, our partner from the US. So, hey, Adam.
Guys, thanks for
Hey
inviting me.
Adam.
We're looking forward to joining yet again.
Yes, actually, you have the distinction of being the first repeat guest, although it feels very odd saying that, considering, I mean, you aren't, are you really a guest? I mean, we feel like we can take you for granted a little bit.
I mean, the honor is all mine, boys. So I really appreciate the nod to climb aboard and spend some time on Practical Nerds with you guys today. So thanks again.
Of course. Hey, I mean, we keep getting asked often, and I think we try our best to pretend like we know it.
Mhm.
We often get asked, hey, we talk about a certain subject. People ask us, hey, how do things of this sort play out in the US? And as I said, Patrick and I try our best to pretend like we know a thing or two. But the truth is, you're the expert on this. So, how's construction tech gone in the last year or so?
Oh, I think peaks and trough. I think there's been a lot of resources deployed in or around big called deep tissued mega themes that are kind of driving the overall macro economy, especially specifically in the States. And I think supply chain has been a big initiative and to make it more resilient. Showing the U.S. is having I guess you could call it a bit of a cold war with the CCP, and so a lot of demand side customers are looking to make their supply chain a little bit more resilient and looking to LATAM to burrow new trade routes. And so you're starting to see a lot of reshoring and onshoring and a lot of resources predicated from the government to make that eventuality. So that's been a big initiative for us, as well as seeing the cross-border logistics playing a part in a heightened interest and focus for the states. So that's where I'm like spending a lot of time and interest as of late.
I mean, just interesting side note, and I think we were discussing this literally yesterday, actually. Quite fascinating. I think when we talk about geopolitics causing trouble with all the trade routes, I think right now, of course, all the attention is on the Suez Canal and the Red Sea. It's quite fascinating. Even the Panama Canal is in a spot of bother. Quite fascinating. I think maybe we can discuss the full story behind the Panama Canal is maybe a discussion for another time, but look it up for those of you who are interested. But so you spoke about solutions solving for supply chain resilience. So what forms could these solutions take?
Yeah, so it's essentially providing additional frictionless channels to buy goods and services to our Latin neighbors. So that can be in a form of material marketplaces, identifying manufacturers, OEMs down in LATAM of high quality, low cost building materials to make their supply chain needs a little bit more resilient. What we were noticing over in COVID that there was supply chains as well. Sorry, the price fluctuations was growing quite volatile, as well as lead times, and so this is another mechanic to shy away from repeating those very costly few years that we experienced a few years ago. Also say that there's another mega trend that we've been kind of focused on for the past couple of years, and that's been in around labor. I know that Patrick in Europe was focused on this as well, and it's that pain point is becoming just a little bit more acute. And for anyone listening in, by 2030, I think up to 40% of the current labor force in the States is going to be retired, And to make matters even worse, the new lifeblood they should be replenishing this skill pool of labor is non-existent. So we're really forced to figure out how to get around this very bleak future of creating the most complex projects with the least experienced individuals, and that's so there's in my opinion there's various solutions or on-ramps to make that not eventuality, and that's trying to build the new labor force in the future, upskilling, and training, as well as any form of full stack robotics and automation to remove humans from some of those very repetitive and onerous tasks and workflows within the build process.
Yeah, we see similar mega shift in Europe, as we've talked about a lot. Does that mean like you feel the US Constru-Tech ecosystem is doing a lot of interesting things in robotics? Are they kind of spearheading here, or perhaps you also wish there was more?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could always wish there was more, but I think those founders need to have just a competencies of creating these very one-of-one robotic solutions, and really also having a very depth of appreciation and empathy for the this sector that they're serving. So while we've seen a lot of A+ founders serving and founding in this space, we wish there's more. Rising tide will lift all boats, but there's a lot of off-road autonomy that we're seeing that's really interesting, 3D printing, full stack robotics, applied to various application and workflows that I remain quite excited and enamored with. But if there's any founders listening, and you are contemplating founding within that vertical or that subsegment, please reach out. We'd very love to meet and see if we can partner and do something together.
Hey, on that note, I was recently telling Shoop here that and I think I wrote about it, that I've learned to fall in love with product founders for robotics, not necessarily someone that even comes with any automation background at all. Just being great at software engineering and at thinking about their stack in the most product way. Componentize the platform, high repeatability, don't automate everything, have a framework for what you automate. In the US, like, what kind of robotics founders do you get excited about? Like, what do they look like?
Oh, that's a really good question. I'd say we recently backed, not recently, a few robotics founders, kind of building offsite full stack robotics solutions, essentially doing work cell automation and kind of building various components of the cell, and then shipping to the actual site. These founders come from big tech, Amazon specifically. So having like a real depth of appreciation of like spinning up and scaling these solutions at scale, but also having taken the necessary time to understand where the deep tissue pain points are within our space, and taking the necessary time to figure out what would be the most viable solution that would alleviate the most pent up pain within the space. Instead of having these founders, sometimes what you see is just they have a good idea and then they raise capital and then they go try to find a solution with a robotic solution, and it really doesn't really move the needle, and they ultimately end up burning a lot of cash, and doing an exploratory mission. So people that have just an appreciation before they go found, I think is pertinent and salient at the very beginning.
So let me challenge the Freedom Eagle here. You being the Freedom Eagle, right? Mm-hmm. So what would you tell me if I said something like, and of course I'm not saying it, it's completely hypothetical.
Yeah.
If I said something like, hey, that's why in the US you get to see so many over-engineered robotic solutions for construction, because there's just too much capital and folks feel comfortable trying to automate everything very early in their journey.
Yeah, I think that's a fair argument. Past couple of years, there was too much capital sloshing around in the ecosystem, in the industry, and so that afforded a lot of founders just to explore and tinker with the hope and expectation that, hey, you know, I won't reach product market fit for a while. I'll learn as I go, and you know, I'll drive by braille, just by braille, right? So, I think that's going to be less of a case moving forward. At least I hope so, because you know, it's just you're kind of lighting a stack of cash on fire within a year or 2 years, which is just unfortunate. So,
yeah, Shu's been recently talking to us about like the value of constraints in having to build your business. I think it applies here too.
Yeah, I think having constraints like builds, you know, creativity. I think, you know, what we've seen in previous ventures, whether it's at Foundamental before, you know, too much capital pushes you to just to spend and grow for the sake of growth. And I think that's what you find is just a very toxic equation. And, you know, Uber, I think, was, you know, very a couple examples there in its company journey that did just that. I think, you know, constraint breeds creativity, and I think that's, you know, best for founders and investors alike. So I 100% agree with you.
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, when I think of, I mean, look, my personal opinion, US and constraint don't really belong in the same sentence, if I may say that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking of US as like one market, but I guess it's very
obvious. Texas should.
Also, Texas and constraint don't belong in the same sentence, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're talking of it as a single country, which it is, but it's such an overwhelmingly large economy, and an even more overwhelmingly large share of venture capital. I mean, Patrick and I think at least in 2 or 3 episodes, we have brought this point home of how significant a share of startups venture capital it has, right? So I wonder what, from your eyes, right, especially being in a global fund, what constraint actually means in the context of the US venture capital landscape? Because quite often, from my vantage point, it seems like, hey, everything is in excess,
exactly.
all the time.
Well,
right?
Exactly. I think there's a lot of forces, you know, at play here that you know, he or she who controls the, you know, the strings of the purse is going to be dictating kind of movement and deployment schedules, which should have some effect of these, you know, the speed of which you're investing, pushing more governance and control when you invest. You know, I think we saw just you know, governance just kind of fly out the window, just to be an ambulance chaser, to be part of a, you know, a deemed hot deal. So, you know, I think LPs are, you know, are feeling the, you know, the cash crunch. They haven't received any of their cash back, you know, because if you think of this in a conveyor belt, you know, the first money comes in as a seed, and then you expect to have some money, you know, be flowing back, you know, in a form of an IPO or an acquisition that will essentially replenish, you know, and refresh the war chest of these LPs that will essentially now, you know, unlock a new fund, new fund raise for, you know, the venture funds. And I think you're starting to see that, you know, having a trickle down effect. So I think you're seeing a little bit more, you know, discipline, I guess you could say, in terms of like the GPs and like the deployment schedule, a little bit more discipline in terms of diligence. You're seeing discipline in terms of like how fast they're deploying. Now, you know, that's not to say that's, you know, 100% across the board. You're still seeing these just kind of mind blowing, you know, schedules to fund with zero, you know, FTX is a prime example. You know, zero diligence, you know, zero governance in a form of.
You can't say zero, or you get a cease and desist letter.
So I guess I'm a hopeful romantic that we start seeing some restraint in the States. I think we need it. But you're starting to see some shimmers and signs that, you know, that is starting to have an effect, because it's having an effect on the capital that they have access to. So they're getting forced to do it, I think. So.
I think one of the things that we noticed in 22 and 23, so let's say roughly past 2 years, is that I've been telling you two, I think a couple of times in our meetings, hey, I feel like the European Constru-Tech deals are getting weirdly expensive. Like there was never a, you know, end of 2021. And I'm talking pre-seed and seed here, to be clear. In Series A and after, you know, that's been different. But in the US, you've made a very, very different experience, Adam. Talk to us about that, because there were points in time when in Foundamental we said, hey, this is like the first time in 15 years of our individual careers each that the US pre-seed and seed valuations are actually better priced than the European ones in Constru Tech.
It's really interesting. Yeah, it's and I'm not mad about it by any by any imagination. I think it's also an element of a lot of funds, generalists, called in the post-COVID, big market correction. They really kind of retraced and went to the sidelines. And I think that really presented an opportunity for sector-specific funds, specifically funds like ours. We're thesis-oriented and we have a posture to invest in double-click or in companies and solutions that have in an odd way been a product market fit for just like a startup. The fund one was in a sense like a early stage startup. Achieving product market fit in terms of our thesis as having those firms and those solutions and those models play out. And while others were sitting on their heels or sitting on their hands, I should say, it afforded us to kind of lean in with conviction. And I think we proved that not just by talking about it like I think every fund was doing, but we were actually we proved that by action. And I think we outpaced anyone under the sun in construction tech. That's not just in the States, but I think globally. And I will say if I could segue into, that's why I really believe, and I'm in love with this global approach, is we have more surface area, meaning we have 3 sandboxes to play in, whereas others only have one. Whereas if we're not forced to just play in one sandbox just in the States or just in Europe. We have the ability to go where the best founders are, the best opportunities are, and the best companies are at that point in time. And that's a lot of value add because our LPs are global. They're playing and building in multiple different sandboxes, meaning they're multinational. So that also provides a huge value creation for them. So I think this flywheel that we've built is incredibly inordinately unique. And it's I think if anything we can I think we're proving it on day to day and year after year. So I think this multi-region approach is I think the winning model. I think it's the only model to be quite honest. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but it's my.
I mean, we're all in. I guess that's.
I'm still here.
That's as clear an endorsement and as a vote as you'll get from any of the three of us.
Yeah.
I think you're right about it.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I mean, Patrick and I, we've had this not debate per se because we are on the same side of this discussion, but various points of time where I think having a glimpse into one geography,
yes,
quite counterintuitively allows us to be so much smarter when we are looking at our own geography. 100%. Right? Because I think it allows us to be aware of what else is happening, if there are winners, losers, market norms, etc., that we should be aware of.
Exactly. And you're absolutely right. There's a multi-fold, multi-benefit that our fund, of ours gets to harvest at the end of the day. As you pointed out, the first one is the kind of the, top of the, supply, the headwaters of knowing what to look out for. Right. It's we already know what the leading ingredients are that made those models just go parabolic.
Mm-hmm.
For an example, an infra market, we know what the ingredients are to make a multi-billion-dollar marketplace. Full stop. And then as well as that shifts and refines our ability to what to look for, but it engages and allows us to appropriately advise the founders when we invest in a company in another region. Because we have the ability to give them probably the most impactful advice to accelerate the firm because we've already seen it. We've already the whole job, I think, in my opinion, post investment for a VC firm is how do you collapse the earned learnings? You don't want to have expensive earned learnings. And if we already saw the blueprint already been proven in another region, it's just why recreate the wheel? And you can pass on those learnings and those savings to the net new founder. So it is really just a win-win across the field.
100%. Do you find that, and again, this is like, it may seem like a complete noob question coming from me.
Yeah.
Do you feel like sometimes it's not so straightforward to convince a US founder that, hey, there may actually be learnings or
Yeah.
superior examples that you could, or harvest knowledge from other regions based on what your experience as a global investor? If yes, why is that the case? Do you think there's some areas of improvement which you think you'd
Yeah.
suggest to obviously, I'm generalizing here, to the general cohort of
Yeah.
US founders?
Exactly. I would say that the best in breed founders, they value that and prioritize that. I would say immature founders still go after name brands. And I
Mhm.
think if you poll those founders that did the latter, a year, 2 year afterwards, they're going to be like, they provided real no value. And
Yeah.
I'll say that to really anyone. I think it's an element of being immature or sophomoric, just because, hey, I want to show that I'm success, and what I deem to be success is I get a term sheet from a well-known, recognized brand. Of course, they will help and assist in a lot of areas, but certainly not in the very early stage. At least I fully believe that.
Mhm.
And I think we'll, pound for pound, I think we would outpace and out-deliver in terms of accelerating the success of these firms than anyone else on this planet, and that includes any generalists that anyone can name. So it really is. I think there has been a aha moment.
Mm-hmm.
You're seeing more of these founders having this, I call it a smelling salt. Why am I keep repeating the same mistakes that my friends are doing?
Yes.
You're starting to see them, putting more value of selecting partners, not just investors. And I think we're noticing on the other side of the table that are just investors, they just check in every quarter. You will get no advice that's relative to where you're building, the sector that you're building. So I think there's a tide shift. I really do.
And is that so? Just to follow up on this, right, Adam?
Mhm.
So is that sort of, I don't know, more or less pronounced specifically in Constru Tech in the US?
Then other sectors, or I think it's really. You mean as in immaturity, or having an aha moment?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. One of the two, right?
Yeah, I would say that you're having more of an aha. I think founders and companies building in our space, I think they're starting to realize and get guidance and advice from previous founders that having a sector-specific fund provides a overarching more value than anyone else, and you should always have them on your cap table, because there's a lot of second, third order benefits that you can be able to harvest. Especially a fund like ours, that you'll be able to provide them with some rich guidance in terms of if you had planned to grow it at a certain point in time, if your LP network are already operating and building in those regions, you're able to assist that. You're able to then give them an actual read on, at a 3-foot level of, hey, how are these incumbents that are going to be consume your product or solution? How should you be, thinking of them at the earliest days? And I think having pulling forward those earned learnings, earlier in the company journey is it compounds the success of the firm. And so you're starting to see that more so in at least in our space, at least from where I'm sitting.
Okay, so let's switch gears to use one of the most favorite idioms here from the three of us. So, Adam, talk to us again. The context is the land of the free, and
is it though? That's the $1 million question.
Let's not make a political podcast out of it. I'm quoting from the anthem.
Yeah.
And the other context is, the sectors we cover.
Yeah.
Let's, call the bracket Constru Tech, including logistics, supply chains, workforce, etc. Within that context, what's been the most crazy dynamic sub-market or model of the last year?
Ooh, sub-market or model? Ooh. That is a good question. Does it have to be in Constru Tech? I'd assume.
Within the context of
Can
that.
it take some shots at prop tech? Is that
Yeah,
fair?
you don't get to say, LLMs or foundational AI.
The most impactful solutions that we've seen. Is that what you said? Just to refresh the question.
Crazy.
Yeah, most dynamic. Yeah.
Most crazy.
Dynamic. Okay.
Yeah. I don't. I guess can I rephrase the question of like the biggest BHAG? Like we're talking these big audacious,
Yeah, sure. I mean,
I think
from the land of the free, you're free to do whatever
exactly
you want.
right. So I appreciate that. That plays. Look, I think the overhype, AI, these foundational models for sure, but I think there's real value to be had in harvest for these sector specific vertical LLMs and AI. I think vertical SaaS will be rebranded to vertical LLMs. I think I really believe that. I think having this very proprietary, dense corpus of data that no one else has, including OpenAI and Google, of like having this rich data that's sitting in the hands of these these big incumbents, or those who are starting up within our space. If you're sitting on call it 50 to 100 years of data, I mean that's like that's a huge oil reserve in my opinion that no one else has, and if you can exploit that for multiple different product categories, or to enhance your own firm in terms of like make it more productive and efficient, operating with less cogs, less people, that's going to be huge. That's going to be transformative. On the flip side of these big wild business models, it's the jury's still out. I think these very these big 4x4 suburban like gas guzzlers. I think you're going to see those models kind of go away like the dinosaurs. Just very capital intense operating firms that just really wasn't really worth the juice wasn't worth the squeeze. And I think you'll start seeing those solutions started being shelved, especially with the current macro environment. So those are the ones to look out for, kind of pirouette around, and some of the ones that I'm really looking forward to seeing implemented at scale.
Yeah, and there were more of them. I think each of our continents or respective markets that we cover had their examples of that. But to put it into the US context, I mean, certainly in the US between 2019 to 2021, there were a lot of gas guzzlers in Constru.
Oh yeah, for sure. But you know what I'm like really excited about? And I'd like to get you guys' thoughts as well. Is I'm kind of viewing this year as well as next year, like call it the Goldilocks moment for large incumbent corporations to acquire deemed threats or value creators or to the business. And I feel like if these corporates do not pull the trigger, these category leaders that are growing at incredibly fast pace will outgrow the news. I think they will grow too large that you won't be able to acquire them. And I really it's why I think it brings me back to the search wars of it's almost like the Yahoo moment on par of missing like YouTube or Facebook, and that was pretty much what led Yahoo's demise in the search war against Google. And I really think it's like these big
isn't the urban lore that Yahoo had an offer out for Google, or Google wanted to get acquired by Yahoo?
No, Yahoo tried to acquire both YouTube and Facebook, and they completely botched it. And that was kind of the last straw that let them lose the war in search against Google. And I really think it's this. It's a rerun. I'm seeing this movie play out again of his large incumbents, and if they don't strike when the iron's hot, I think they're going to be really, it's either make or break, in my opinion. So, that's how I view it. Maybe I'm over-indexing a little bit too much, but I'd be curious to get your guys' thoughts as well.
I mean, I'm in agreement with you. So I think 3-4 episodes ago, I want to say maybe episode 19 or 20 of Practical Nerd. Right? So go and check it and verify if what I'm saying is correct. One of the bold predictions I made for 2024 is that there'll be at least one very noteworthy acquisition in the AEC space There's more specific details, perhaps, but I don't remember if I'd shared more details. But so let's keep it vague at this
No,
point.
you didn't.
Okay, so I think let's keep it vague at this point. And I'm in agreement with you. I think there's certain verticals and spaces where I think the time is now.
Yeah.
And if the moves aren't made between now and next year,
Yeah.
there's a legitimate disruptive threat
Yeah.
to these incumbents.
Yeah. It put it another way, it's everyone's trying to dethrone Autodesk, right? In a way.
Mm-hmm.
But their model is to acquire fast. So,
but not us. We're fans. Just to be clear, we're real fans.
Yeah,
real fans.
So it's like it's everyone's do you want to be more of it? Do you want to take more of the pie from Autodesk? I feel like this is the year. I mean, seeing the Constru Tech grow over the past 5 or 6 years, I just think if the window of opportunity, this temporal duration of call it 12 to 24 months, if you do not scoop these up, if you're unable to scoop these up or have some formal partnership with them, it's lights out for a lot of these firms. I think maybe not lights out, but you reduce your overall influence in reach in the longer game. Call it 10, 12 years.
Hey, I was waiting all this while for when someone will bring up AI. You had just a few minutes ago done it, so I was waiting.
All on the goal line, man.
Exactly. So I was waiting for my chance to bring it up. I mean, look, there's all this talk of AI, and I think if there's any market which is an obvious source of, I guess, inspiration for the next AI leader, it has to be the US, right? Of course, that also goes back to maybe a whole lot of hope and promise, right? So how are you looking at AI in construction tech right now in the US?
That was actually a topic we actually discussed my first episode, and it's you're right. I think. Look, the foundational models, right? Look, if you really want to chart the ways to play and provide value into AI, and like you have the GPUs, which I think everyone kind of slept on with NVIDIA. Then you have these foundational models. Certainly we can't invest there. It just doesn't. There's really no thesis fit. But there's vertical applications which we've invested in now too, which I think are going to be provide incredible inordinate value for their ICPs, their first ideal customer profiles. One such company is a vertical AI co-pilot for the supply chain. How do you democratize, call it Amazon Scott, this Amazon supply chain optimization technologies, and that's really interesting. And if you can provide a prediction and optimization tool for a lot of these called SMBs, firms that are generating anywhere from 50 to 200 million in net revenue in the early days, I think you're gonna provide inordinate value relative to the traditional methodologies that they're using to track, forecast, simulate, do localization, operation planning, and then as well as you'd be able to have some agency, meaning you should be able to then predict or provide some recommendations to these customers, at scale if you're successful. Case in point example would be, hey, Shub or Patrick or hey, Fundamental, you've been buying from this supplier, for the past couple of years, but then they've been routinely, late for XYZ reasons. Here's a comparable supplier that would essentially be an easy replacement. Would you like us to make that change for you? And you'd be able to have that agency, and at one centralized source of truth, which I think would be very impactful. Instead of going through all of your emails, all these spreadsheets, where's my order? When is my order supposed to arrive? And it's just no one knows. Have you ever seen the Wizard of Oz? It's like it's that way. I feel like everyone's operating under that methodology, which is sad. So more visibility, I think, would lend the industry a lot of value.
So you're right. I'll go for it, Patrick.
So I've been saying, right, that procurement technologies, marketplaces, integrated supply chains for Constru Tech, I think India is the hub to look at. And,
Sure.
Our other markets are catching up, but with their own local versions and avatars. And by the way, also earned learnings of models that didn't work, right? And then Europe, I actually think from our global view and the comparisons we can draw is that, in my opinion, for Constru yielding some of the most exciting projects, right? So I'm not talking about necessarily like hundreds of them, but just like if you really look carefully, there are very interesting projects here, and perhaps more interesting than anywhere else.
Yeah.
And what would you say for Constru in the US, everybody should be looking to as the hub?
The hub as in, what do you define hub? What do you
like that's where a certain type of solution and technology will always emerge first.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I think like AI, I think the tip of the spear is, I think in the States, and you're starting to see, look, if you look at the founders that we've invested in, they're spun out of Google that were doing large language modeling for 10 years.
Google research, to be precise.
Exactly. So you have an unfair advantage because you were here in the States. You're already spending close to a decade of your professional career at arguably one of the most successful companies on this planet. So you have that unfair advantage. So I would say like certainly AI relative to some applications. Again, supply chain resiliency. Can you hedge against your supply chain? I think this the states are desperately trying to mobilize and spend incredible amounts of capital to reshore and onshore, and it needs more. There needs a lot of solutions need to come into place for that to come to eventuality, and you need to increase your discoverability of those suppliers, and those are down in LATAM. So I think the cross-border nature over in US and LATAM, I think, is still relatively exciting.
Can I throw an infamous one at you, and you tell me whether I'm wrong?
Shoot.
What if someone, not me,
of course.
What if someone said to you that, hey, in the US also, you will find the most grifts on construction materials science?
Oh yeah, grifters want to grift.
Someone would say that, not me.
Grifters want to grift, and we've seen some grifters, grifting, as they say. Yeah, you have to look. I think we've been fortunate in not playing the ambulance chaser game of not doing proper due diligence, making sure we have proper governance, doing pretty deep dive analysis, and so I think we've been holding firm with how we conduct proper analysis and diligence on these founders and et cetera. So you definitely find. You've ever gone with a kid when you go hiking and you pull up some rocks and you never know what kind of insects or bugs are going to be jumping at you? I mean, it's so. I think you're seeing you're showing that it's proven out, right? It's like these boogeymen are real. These grifters are real. They're fleecing you with real money. And it's not like, oh, there's a ghost in the closet. They're going to be grifters, and
no, they're doing it in the open.
Yeah, exactly. So like, it's like you're not sold on just like this.
Which, by the way, I'm not saying that someone would be saying.
So yeah, I mean, look, you're probably going to come to the the defense of my statesman. More founders, you have a higher probability of grifters, maybe if you want to put it that way. But
by the way, that's someone who would be saying that. I think would also say anyone in that market, regardless of where they come from. It's a big market, lots of immigration, lots of migration, etc. It doesn't have anything to do with where you're from.
Yeah, exactly. Knock on wood, I think we haven't had any grifters to date. Whether it's the States or Europe or Asia Pacific. So. Yeah.
I mean, I will say so. Levity aside, right? So. Look, my career started when like the first solar boom and solar technology boom happened. And then I was one of the first ones to actually look at like battery technology for the energy applications, both grid scale as well as small scale. And I'm still burnt out from what crazy unscientific.
Yeah.
I have to watch my language now in order not to PG this episode. Things got funding back then, and I feel very, very reminded of that in the material science space. And we've been making fun of this now because this is an episode about the US Constru Tech market. But what we just said with levity, by the way, applies to the European ecosystem just as equally. It's just we're being very careful around some of these scientific, or actually I have to say unscientific claims that on a chemical and physics level will never be achieved. And so there's so much money chasing that in both markets, actually.
Yeah, I think that was an element of why you saw so many, grifters come to, bubble up to the surface, because there was just like, there's just so much cash just floating around, it's just so easy to,
and it's not hidden. It's like they're standing on a street corner and, waving with a water cash.
Exactly. And then, of course, there's a lot of bad practices because there's a lot of cash and, there was no constraint. There was, at sometimes, no governance, no diligence. And hopefully with this market correction, that forces firms, to, have a, check themselves, everyone, and make sure that, those things don't repeat. But I don't think you'll see a lot of those founders, come to market as much. The opportunity is not there as much, if you want to put it that way, so.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully there will be 2 or 3 very transformative companies that can only be good for the planet.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure it has been the most efficient capital allocation process of the last few years.
Yeah. What was the ranking? I know we love the rankings, but did you guys see those rankings about the amount of Forbes 100 people that ended up becoming like grifters? Did you see that? I think
I'm aware of that list. You mean like former Forbes listers who committed more fraud?
Yes, exactly. So that's the only list I kind of believe in, and that's held true and corroborated.
So I may be off on the numbers, but I think it's something like that list, the people in that list raised something like 6 or 8 billion.
Yeah.
And they either committed fraud or lost money to their shareholders to the extent of something like 20 billion or something like that.
And now cross-references against universities.
Yeah. I mean, I know. I hate to, point and make light of, those events and those individuals. But
that was
hopefully,
all bad luck.
Hopefully that
just
chapter is
bad luck.
Yeah.
No intent.
I mean, I was going to say, it is a statement made in levity, but truth be told, it's also not very far from truth. I think from my perspective, in response to the question, so Patrick said, hey, what does Europe do best? What India does best, etc. And if the question is, what does the US do best? Frankly, almost everything else.
That is true.
Yeah. And I think when you think about it, it is, I think from my perspective, as close to the truth. And that is what makes the US such a phenomenal market.
Yeah.
That is true. That is true. But as an investor, Adam, I imagine you have to sift through a lot. You have to filter a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Just the sheer amount of companies or founders we get to meet. I mean, it's a good problem to have. I guess it's a champagne problem. It's a good problem. I think that's what collectively wakes us up and makes us excited to come into the to work every day and get to meet very passionate founders, very competent, very smart founders that you want to back and support and make their dream a reality. So I love this job. So.
So I know you have to help into a meeting with the US founder.
Yeah.
Like literally now. So what is your 10 seconds pitch to US Constru Tech founders to meet you?
Reach out. I mean, anything under the sun. You could be as early as just you're ready to found and you want to explore avenues, areas of interest, white spaces that we think are still up for grabs. Your seed A company, anything across the field. Get a hold of me, Adam@Foundamental.com. Would love to meet you, and hopefully we can partner and hopefully we can accelerate the success of your journey. So.
Do you have an ownership target?
Yeah, we'd like to have at least 10% or more if we're leading, and that's been, I think, historically speaking, we're batting average on in around that ownership target. So, but yeah, we're open. So reach out. My DMs are open, as they say. Like and subscribe.
Good.
Yeah. So
look, I know we got to run, but in the outro we'll play the American anthem.
Ooh.
Okay. So we'll make sure.
You guys are too kind.
It's been great having you.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for having me, gentlemen.
This was phenomenal. Thank you, Adam.
Alrighty, guys.
Cheers.
Shortly. So
You will.
alrighty, guys.